This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers.
Another one just hit the building. Wow.
There are no words.
It appears that something hit the Pentagon on the outside of the 5th corridor.
We have a report now that a large plane crashed this morning north of the Somerset County Airport, which is in western Pennsylvania.
It all started at 8:45 on a clear Tuesday morning. We had a live camera up on what looked like a smoking slash across one of the World Trade Center towers. A passenger plane had flown into it, and I remember some of us here at CNN thinking this was some sort of freak event. Then a second plane flew into the other tower. That was at 9:03 a.m., and at that point there was this deepening dread in everyone. Something was wrong in a way we'd never seen before. Airports, bridges, tunnels in New York and New Jersey shut down. Within 30 minutes, President George W. Bush said we were under an apparent terrorist attack. And minutes after that, every airport in the country was closed. That had never happened before. It wasn't over, though. At 9:43 a.m., a third passenger jet crashed into the Pentagon. Dark smoke rolled up from that part of that huge building. All eyes and many cameras were on that and the two burning towers in New York. And as all of us watched at 10:05, one of those towers gave way where it was smoking, the top part crushing down on the rest of it and sending up debris in boiling gray clouds. 5 minutes later, part of the Pentagon collapsed and a fourth hijacked jet crashed in a rural part of Pennsylvania. The White House, the United Nations, the state and justice departments, the World Bank, all evacuated. America-bound Atlantic flights were rerouted to Canada. And the second Trade Center tower came down at 10:28. So many closings, evacuations, shutdowns. Except for emergency response teams, the heroes of 9/11, the country virtually stopped what it was doing and gathered around TV screens. The president appeared just after 1 p.m. and asked Americans to pray, and there wasn't much else we could do. The destruction was more or less done around 10:30. It was less than 2 hours from the first crash, but the change it inflicted was immeasurable. More Americans were killed on September 11, 2001 than on the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. And when President Bush addressed the nation that night at 8:30, his tone was one of sympathy, resolve, and warning to anyone who'd planned or supported the attacks.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
In the difficult days that followed, we learned that the Al-Qaeda terrorist group led by Osama bin Laden was responsible for all of this. And America's attention and anger turned to Afghanistan, whose Taliban leaders were giving Al-Qaeda a safe place to live and operate. World-changing events that occurred 19 years ago today. I'm Carl Azus for CNN 10. The attacks of September 11, 2001 were the worst terrorist attacks ever made on American soil. They were physically carried out by 19 Al-Qaeda terrorists who hijacked the 4 planes. 2,977 people were killed. That includes hundreds of firefighters, police officers, and Port Authority officers who lost their lives trying to save others. In remembrance of the victims, Patriot Day was established. President George W. Bush signed it into law a few months after the attacks. No members of the Senate or the House of Representatives voted against that bill. And every year since, Patriot Day has been a time when memorials, ceremonies, and church services have been held in honor of those who were killed on September 11th. This Friday, Republican President Donald Trump and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden are both scheduled to attend a memorial event in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That's where United Airlines Flight 93 crashed in 2001. Ceremonies are also scheduled to take place at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum in New York City, though these remembrance events are going to be scaled back this year because of coronavirus concerns. In New York, for example, the traditional reading of the victims' names won't be done live. Recordings of family members saying the names will be featured instead. CNN's Kate Baldwin toured the National September 11th Museum when it first opened.
These tridents were from the North Tower. They were recovered in the aftermath of the attacks. We brought them back here and basically built the museum all around them.
Joe Daniels is president and CEO of the 9/11 Memorial.
You're not whitewashing it. This is the raw, dirty material.
Exactly. I mean, this is the steel that bore the attacks.
The museum is built almost entirely underground, some 70 feet down. It sits in the precise footprint of the World Trade Center.
So this is exactly where the South Tower started and went up 1,350 feet.
A striking display of the sheer scale of the destruction, with poignant reminders of the tragedy at every turn.
I mean, this is unbelievable.
This is actually the front of this fire truck. This is the cab.
You wouldn't know.
Wouldn't know, and it's completely burned out and destroyed.
Then there's the retaining wall that remarkably held strong even when the towers fell.
When the towers came down, all that debris that was here, right in this space, provided bracing for that wall. And when that debris was clear, there was a big concern that the wall would breach, would flood lower Manhattan.
It could have been so much worse. But this wall held under all of that pressure.
Visitors will also walk alongside the survivor stairs.
Used by hundreds of people as the buildings are crumbling, running from the dust cloud to escape to safety. And it's for all our visitors to understand the story of survival.
And likely one of the most emotional stops in the museum. This art installation mimics the blue sky on that fateful morning. Behind it, the still unidentified remains of 9/11 victims. The move met with mixed emotion from their families.
A still shocking statistic is that 1,100 family members never got any human remains back to bury, never got to go through the ritual of laying their loved ones to rest. It's not a public space at all. Only family members are allowed back behind the wall.
Right next door, a room dedicated to the lives of those lost.
Exactly. That room is an area called In Memoriam, and it's a photographic portrait of each and every one of the 2,983 victims. You see pictures, a father coaching his son's Little League team, a wedding. You see the lives that were lost that day, and not just about how they died, it's who these people were.
Throughout the museum, chilling reminders of the day. Handmade flyers for the missing, a cross emerging from the wreckage. Everyday items simply left behind.
We help, through these artifacts and images, tell that story of just, it was panic.
And while the museum is vast, one small exhibit has been the biggest source of controversy. Its focus, the terrorists themselves, including a film criticized for not making a clear enough distinction between Islam and Al-Qaeda.
There's been a lot of criticism. Why give any time to the terrorists?
You know, it's one way to look at it is you don't build a Holocaust museum and not be very clear that the Nazis were the ones who committed those atrocities. Al-Qaeda was an extremist terrorist group, but no one will come through this exhibit and in any way think that we are indicting an entire religion, which we in no way are.
It seems very appropriate that you end here at the last column.
And it's, again, goes right back to resiliency, seeing those messages of hope and remembrance on this very tall column that's still standing strong.
Kate Baldwin, CNN, New York.
And that's where we'll conclude our special coverage of the 19th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. We'll leave you today with our traditional Friday recap of some other events of the week. I'm Carl Azus for CNN 10.